To watch more Bhagavad Gita discourse videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Is life contemporary, if you ask me? No, not at all. Life is the same. You think of the first man who set his foot on this earth, and you think of the present man who is getting born or already born. If he was a human, he had a body with 5 sensory organs. And these sensory organs began to function after the child is born. Gradually, the mento-intellectual framework started evolving inside. We also have an ego to coordinate the different functions in the body and also inner. This human personality remains the same then as well as now. Is there anybody in this assembly who can say that human personality has changed the least? You are doubtful? Our eyes and the old man's eyes, are they different? What about the ears? What about the tongue? Tell me. Now, what about the world? Has it changed? The earth is the same, water is the same, air is the same, fire is the same, sky or space is the same. The entire world is made up of matter and energy. It's a matter-energy aggregate, the whole world. And matter and energy are inert, insentient. There is only one factor, sentient in nature. And that can be found only in living organisms. And we can understand it and probe into it only in the human body. All beings are alive, but you have never accessed the consciousness or the sentience part in the body. Our body is a matter-energy aggregate. Matter-energy aggregate. And matter and energy are inert, insentient. At the same time, we are a sentient being. We have feelings, we have cognitions, recognitions, we have thoughts, knowledge, memory, reason, and what not. None of these properties belongs to either matter or energy. So I am asking you, our body is matter and energy, I said. It belongs to the material ken. Tell me, what about the mind, intelligence and ego, the inner personality that you have? Can you call it material? Answer me. Is it physical? Is it material? Is it energial? Then what is it? To differentiate things from materiality and materialness, we call it spiritual. So what is spiritual? It is not the ghost. Spiritual is a word. To distinguish itself from material things, we are using a word spiritual. That spirituality in you is what cognizes your body and says that I have a body. The word I that you are using is not referring to the matter, energy, body. The body is my body, my mind, my intelligence, my ego, my car, my family, my child. All the other things are mine. The I becomes different. The I is not a reference to the body. It is not even a reference to the mind, intelligence and ego. It is quite different. That I refers to the spiritual inner presence in your body. Am I clear or not? Now you tell me, are you spiritual or material? Is there any doubt? You are spiritual by the very fact of your birth. We are spiritual. We are spiritual. If you are not spiritual, you will be carried for cremation. You will only be the inert body, insentient body, which is not capable of sensing, comprehending, nothing it will be able to do. So we are all spiritual. And all the excellence that we are referring to is only as long as the body is animated and activated. Our matter-energy body becomes animate only when it is animated by the inner presence called the spiritual one. Whether you talk, whether you think, whether you walk or whether you run, all these are activities our mind is activated, our body is activated to do. So let us understand that all forms of ability, skill, drive, enthusiasm and excellence, all of them are spiritual in nature and character. Am I clear or not? So when you care about spiritual excellence, it is the excellence of the mind, excellence of the intelligence, excellence in character, excellence in behavior, and excellence in interactions. Our life is experiential. Our life is equally interactional. Am I clear? All experiences do not belong to the body. All experiences are inner and they belong to the mind. Our body is experienced by the mind. Our body is experienced. We have a period of time called sleep when you are not conscious of the body, conscious of the mind, conscious of the intelligence. You are not. You are not conscious of the ego, not to speak of the world. Being conscious of nothing else, the sleeper sleeps, wakes up and then says, I did not know anything, I slept. Tell me, who is the one that slept? Boliye na thoda. Who is the one that slept? He is not the body, not the mind, not the intelligence, not the ego. Still he wakes up comfortably refreshed and then says, I slept. Mind you, sleep is an intransitive verb. It implies no object. That is where the subject is very clearly understood and is distinct in us. Every form of excellence belongs to this I, my dear souls. So the excellence is spiritual in character for everybody. And our spiritual excellence that we are going to talk about is relating to our life, experiential life, interactional life. We must have an excellent characteral coordinates. Behavioral majesty we must have. Interactional excellence also we must have. It is to generate this that the whole education and discussion in spirituality becomes necessary. Let us be very clear about it. Our mind is not a part of the physical body. It is associated with the body. Mind is not physical. It is not material. It is associated with the body. But don't think that it is a part of the body. Body is physical in character. Mind is not physical. Every experience belongs to the mind. Our life is experiential. It is equally interactional. All interactions really arise from and also terminate in the mind. When I say this, are you able to understand? You think of an activity. That thought process is in the mind. You design it and thereafter you start implementing it. In order to implement it, the mind employs the sensory organs, employs the bodily organs, and it accomplishes the act. And when the act is completed, physically it's over, it passes, the memory remains in you. I have come here and I am speaking to you. All of you are hearing me. You are physically present. Your Swamiji also is physically present. After some time he will stop, all of you will get up and we shall disperse. As an act or as an event or as an episode, it has passed forever. But its memory remains in the mind. Mind is the fulcrum of our life. All experiences are in there. You are seated in my front. I am looking at you. I am seeing every one of you. Such a wide range of people cannot be contained physically in my body. Where do I experience you? Tell me. I am looking at the sun, 145.5 million kilometers away from the earth. I am not seeing the real sun. I only see a refracted sun. And light rays come from there, strike my cornea. And the eyes enable formation of an image. That image and imprint is formed by the mind, the conscious part of my personality, and it is an imprint. I only see the imprint of the sun, never the sun. Will you agree or disagree? I don't say anything for disagree. Whatever I say, you cannot refute it. This is the way I speak. I am specialized in it. See, you are only seeing a mental imprint. An imprint with the help of the eyes, the mind has produced. And what are these eyes? They are also creations of the mind itself. The fetus in the mother's womb, it starts growing by itself, forming the different types of organs in the body. Has the mother helped, father helped, external world played any part in it? The mother's blood was taken as nutrition by the fetus, that is all. It is all the spiritual presence in the body that has formed our body. And with the body it is born, and then experience and interaction start. My dear souls, mind is the sole focus and locus of all experiences and interactions. Shall I assume that you have heard me and understood? Huh? Now, whenever we speak of excellence, this excellence, it comes from where? It comes from an analysis of our experiential life and interactional life. We want to be excellent in all that we think, speak, and act. The thoughts are proceeding, emerging from within. The speech also is motivated from within, and actions also are motivated from within. The individual remains the same, and the interacted with objects alone are variable and different. All interactions are between the individual and the rest of the world. When you look at the body, you interact with the body. When you look at the wall or roof, you interact with it. The interacting individual or subject remains the same. The objects alone are different. Between the object and the subject, you tell me, excellence is generated, preserved, and employed by the individual subject or the objects? Huh? Boliye na? I think I should repeat my question again. The excellence belongs to our own personality, the mind and intelligence, or excellence belongs to our house, our vehicle, our travel, etc. So excellence is a coordinate of our own inner personality. Am I clear? Do you understand and accept? So for any kind of an excellence, touch your inner personality. Enrich it, empower it, elevate it, strengthen it, expand it. That is the only way. Have as much of subject education as possible. Try to make the students understand that there is a mind part and how to make the mind excellent. The Harvard University recently has produced a paper in which they say, we are on an average awake for 17 hours, 1020 minutes. Out of this 1020 minutes, you must at least be meditating for 20 minutes. To nourish our body, you spend 2.5 or 3 hours a day. Tell me, is there anybody in this assembly who similarly tries to nourish the mind and the intelligence? Boliye? 2.5 hours, 3 hours we spend to have our food, to have our drink, to go to the bathroom, toilet, etc., to dress. So many things we are doing. Proportionately, when it comes to a question of enriching and empowering your personality inner, what are you doing? I think we are blind. We are blind. We are myopic. To understand that we have an inner personality and it has to be enriched and empowered to become excellent. The excellence is from you, in you, of you, by you. The excellence belongs to your mind, your intelligence primarily. So all forms of excellence are mento-intellectual. And that excellence is expressed and manifested and displayed through our sensory interactions. This is a point that I would like you to know very well. Bhagavad Gita, as I said, is a part of Mahabharata, the great historic narration Vedavyasa made 5,156 years ago. You know that Pandavas were on the one side and Kauravas, Duryodhanas were on the other side. All the armies, both the armies came and assembled in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Identification marks were given. A charter was made for the rules and regulations of the war. Both parties signed it. Everything went on. Then the Kaurava army, I am not going into details, under the leadership of Bhishma, the commander-in-chief, the grandfather of both, they raised the war cries. There was nobody to respond to them. Drishtadyumna was the commander-in-chief on the Pandavas side, but he kept quiet. Who is he to respond to a great, towering, invincible personality like Bhishma? Kept quiet. When everybody kept quiet, Krishna interfered. He took his Panchajanya and blew. He had come there with a promise that I will not directly participate in the war, nor shall I wield weapons. But Krishna was very clever, far-sighted. Panchajanya is not a weapon. So he took it and blew. When he blew, all the members, all the army people on his side started blowing in a beautiful order. First of all, it was Arjuna, Bhima, Yudhishthira, Nakula, Sahadeva, etc. My dear souls, only conches were blown. The other instruments were not employed. This sound of conch was so great and huge that it permeated into the entire interspace and shook the minds of the Duryodhana army, says Sanjaya. This is the influence of Dharmakshetra, where Kuru had done immense austerity, purifying austerely the whole battlefield. Because it was a field of dharma, the fight that transpired there also became dharmic, and it had to sustain the victory of dharma. Am I clear? Are you following me? When all this was done, and the discharge of arrows alone was to begin, Arjuna suddenly felt, I must examine both the armies before deciding upon my strategy. So lifting his Gandiva up, for the first time he gave a tall order to Krishna. Krishna, his charioteer, drive my chariot afront and station it in a proper place so that I can examine the armies. Krishna drove the chariot. The horses galloped, and he restrained them in front of Bhishma and Drona and said, I have stopped. See, examine and find out whether you have the potential to fight. Arjuna expected something different. On seeing Bhishma and Drona, and also a lot of kith and kin on both sides, he completely crumbled. His Gandiva slipped from his hand. The whole body began trembling. Mouth went dry. Mind started whirling around. And the intelligence said, this is a sinful war. Don't fight. Tell me, what is there left in a human personality? Gandiva was the best acquisition that Arjuna had. That slipped. He was unable to hold it. See, it slipped. He left his bow and arrow and said, I will not fight. This is a sinful war. Mind you, Arjuna was not alone present there. The war was as a sight before Krishna, before the Bhishma, before Drona. None of them felt as Arjuna did, but he alone did. Understand the difference between the two. The situation is the same, but the observers and participants are different. It all depends upon how you as an individual react to or respond to whatever is in front. So Arjuna crumbled. In the crumbling, he said, I am retreating from the war. I will take bhiksha, alms and live, but not fight. After having come to the battlefield, can any fighter speak a language like this? Battleground is not a place for sympathy. It is not a place for showing your love and concern. Everyone has individually come there to fight and kill or get killed. It is not a theater. It is not a cinema place. It is a place for sufficiently determined fight and its outcome. So Krishna said, this cannot work. You should not speak anything like this. At the last point, when everything is done, war cries also had been raised, and only discharge of arrows is to take place. Do not say like that. Get up. Klaibyam masmagamaha. This kind of an unmanliness, imbecility and weakness you cannot undergo. When his dear Krishna told him so, he was naturally susceptible to it. He accepted it. The crying Arjuna, he stopped his tears. What did Krishna do? The crumbled Arjuna, he elevated him from the mere level of emotions, the mind, to the level of reason and rationality. Am I clear? Huh? Whenever you are aggrieved, don't go on crying and crying. Cry for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. You will have some relief. Tear glands should be used. There is no doubt. But don't go on crying. Think about it. What has confronted me? What is my discomfiture? What am I supposed to do? Is it all for the mind and the emotion to lead our life? Or there is also a praise for lofty reason and rationality? Should we not try to evolve the best of insight in any given situation? So when Krishna told him like this, he recovered. But he started asking, Krishna, I will not raise any single word about my relatives, kith and kin, etc. Sympathy and love I have completely left, but I have still the sense of propriety in me. So he says, how can I fight this war? Do you like to hear Arjuna's words? Huh? How many? Only 2 or 3? Guru nahatva hi mahanubhavan shreyo bhoktum paikshamabiha loke hatvarthakamamstu guru nihaiva bhunjiya bhogan rudhira pradigdhan. You know, it's a scripture. You should understand. It is a celebrated, exalted, magnificent, superlative writing. Gurun ahatva. Krishna, you have stationed the chariot right in front of my teacher and grandfather. The moment I see them, I should fall at their feet and seek their blessings. Both of them love me. They don't hate me. How can there be a war between non-haters, lovers, with people with mutual respect and regard? It is not possible. Suppose I fight this war and I kill them. What will happen? So I believe it is better for me to become a sannyasin and start begging for my alms. Hatvartha kamamstu guru nihaiva bhunjiya bhogan rudhira pradigdhan. Suppose we fight, kill them and win our kingdom back. Do you know, Krishna, what kind of enjoyment that we will have? Every object of enjoyment that we have will be with the stain of their blood. Are you hearing? Thoda suniye na. It will be stained by their blood, he says. Na chaidad vidmakkadaranno gariyo yadva jayema yadiva no jayeyuhu yaneva hatva na jijivishamaha tevasthidaha pramukhe dhartarashtraha. Suppose, Krishna, you tell me, you are a very clever and skillful fighter. With all the skill, can you not fight the army, avoiding Bhishma and Drona? And when Bhishma and Drona alone are left, why don't you lay down your weapon and fall at the feet and ask them for their blessings? Can you do it? My dear Krishna, I am unable to do it. Why? Why? Because they are right in my front. Without battling them, they will not allow me to penetrate into the army. If they were somewhere on the side or a corner, what you said I could have done. So I won't be able to avoid. So I am wondering whether I should fight and win or whether I should fight and lose. The more and more I think about it, Arjuna says, I feel confused. So he makes his grand confession. Karpanya dosho bhagata swabhavaha pruchhami tvam dharma sammudha chetaha yat shreyasyan nishchidam bruhitan me shishyasteham shadimam tvam prabannam. I have nothing more to say, Krishna. The more and more I think about it, I am confused. I am deluded. I become weaker and weaker. The sense of withdrawal becomes more and more. Therefore, I admit that I am deluded. I have a narrow mind. I have a shrunk mind. I have a withdrawn mind. So what shall I do? Yat shreyasyan nishchidam bruhidan me. Whatever will bring real goodness and shreyas for me, please instruct me. And for that, I make you my instructor, my guru, and I announce myself as your humble disciple student. My dear souls, the entire dialogue took place between Krishna and Arjuna. Krishna as an instructor and Arjuna as a student. Don't bring any other relationship in Bhagavad Gita. Both of them are human. Both of them are true then, true now, and true ever. Let us be very clear. We suddenly call Krishna Bhagavan and escape from the whole site. Whatever Krishna has asked or said, it is for enlightenment, information, absorption, assimilation, and then implementation. Anything that Bhagavad Gita said is for you to absorb inwardly, assimilate, so that it will become part and parcel of your personality. Once assimilated, it will start becoming express and you will start expressing it. Just like any other teacher will teach the student, Krishna also is called upon to teach. But Arjuna adds, I have something more to add, Krishna. Nahi prapashyami mamapanudyat yachokam uchoshanam indriyanam. Krishna, do you know what is my condition? I am overpowered by grief. I am full with grief. Normally, grief affects the mind. In my case, the grief is so much, it's a Himalayan grief, that my whole body and senses are scorched. Have you ever experienced such a grief? Boliye? I don't think. The whole body is scorched. Yachokam uchoshanam indriyanam. Don't tell me, Arjuna, Pat, come somehow, get up, let us fight. Suppose you fight and lose, then you will get heavens. You win, you get back the kingdom. Both these are physical possibilities, never speak about it. What I now want is a redressal of my grief. Are you with me? Huh? Redressal of my grief. That is what I want.
Join our live event on the 10th, 11th and 12th of October 2020. Register at www.globalgita.org.